Today, we're going to talk about someone who didn't just help build the future, she taught it how to speak. Seriously, we're talking about Grace Hopper, a pioneer who completely changed our relationship with technology. Her story is absolutely fascinating, so let's just dive right in. Okay, I'll start with a question for you. What in the world does a moth have to do with the phone in your pocket? It sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But the answer actually takes us back to the very dawn of computing. So check this out. This is a real log entry from 1947. Grace Hopper's team was working on this giant room-sized computer called the Mark II, and it just stopped working. They looked everywhere, and what did they find? A literal moth stuck in one of the machine's relays. They pulled it out, taped it into the logbook, and just like that, the term debugging a computer was born. No joke. So who was this person at the center of it all? Let me introduce you to Grace Brewster Murray Hopper, a mathematician with a PhD from Yale, a rear admiral in the US Navy, and honestly, a total rebel. A friend of hers once said she was all Navy on the outside, but on the inside, she was a pirate just waiting to be set loose. And this rebellious streak? Oh, it started early. When she was just 7 years old, she took apart 7, not 1, but 7 alarm clocks just to see how they ticked. Later on, when World War II broke out, the Navy told her she was too old and too skinny to join. Well, she found a way around that, got an exemption, and graduated first in her class. And get this, she kept a clock on her wall that ran backwards, just to remind herself and everyone else to always question the way things are done. So that brings us to her first huge revolution. You have to understand, early computers were absolute monsters. Programming them wasn't about typing elegant code. No, it was this brutal manual process of flipping switches and plugging in wires. It was a language that only the machine could understand. I mean, this chart says it all, right? Before Grace Hopper, programming was a nightmare. It was slow, it was full of mistakes, and you basically had to be a hardware genius to do it. She looked at all that chaos and thought, there has to be a better way. What if we could just talk to the computer? And in 1952, she built it. She created the A0 system, which was the world's very first compiler. Think of it like a universal translator. It took human-friendly instructions and automatically translated them into the ones and zeros the machine needed. This single invention, this translator, laid the groundwork for all modern software.
But here's the crazy part. At first, nobody believed her. Her bosses, her colleagues, they were all super skeptical. She famously said, "I had a running compiler and nobody would touch it." They literally told her that computers were just for math, and that was it. But Grace, being the pirate she was, just kept pushing.
So she taught a machine to understand symbols. But she wasn't done. Not even close. She had an even bigger, even more radical idea. What if she could teach a computer to understand plain English? What if your boss, or an accountant, or anyone could write a program? And that big idea led directly to COBOL. Building on her earlier work, she was a key advisor to the team that created it. Her vision was so simple and yet so profound. The people who actually use the data should be able to write their own programs in a language they already understood. And this is what made it a game changer. Look at that. That's a real line of COBOL code. You don't need to be a programmer to understand what that does. It's just a sentence. For the very first time, business people could write business logic. This was a massive shift in who could use a computer. And the impact was just unbelievable. COBOL became the language of business, period. It ran banks, it ran insurance companies, it ran governments. And believe it or not, there are still billions of lines of COBOL code running critical systems all around the world right now, as we speak. So her technical genius is undeniable, but that's only half of her story. Her legacy as a leader and a teacher in the Navy is just as huge. She didn't just build amazing tech, she built up the people who would go on to build the future. I mean, just take a look at this career. It's incredible. She served for decades, retired, got called back to active duty more than once, and finally retired for good in 1986 at the age of 79. 79. She was a rear admiral and the oldest active duty officer in the entire US military. All right, so what's this all about? 11.8 inches. Seems pretty random, doesn't it? Well, for Grace Hopper, this was one of her most famous and powerful teaching tools. She used to carry around these pieces of wire all cut to exactly this length, and she'd hand them out to everyone, from generals to students. Why? Because this piece of wire represents a nanosecond. It's the farthest an electrical signal can travel in 1/1000th of a second. It was her brilliant way of making a totally abstract concept processing speed, something you could literally hold in your hand. And, for all of her incredible technical achievements, this is what she said mattered most to her. She was a mentor through and through. She was constantly pushing young people to take chances, to ask why not, and to go build the things that everyone else said were impossible. So let's bring this all back to today. Why does Grace Hopper's story still matter so much? Well, because the principles she fought for are literally woven into the DNA of the technology that you and I use every single day. This table really drives it home. Her wild idea about human-readable code? That's the whole philosophy behind modern languages like Python. Her relentless push for standards so code could run anywhere? That's the bedrock of cloud computing. And that compiler she invented against all odds, it's the ancestor of the software that makes every single app on your phone actually work. Her vision is everywhere. When you really think about it, Grace Hopper was more than just a programmer or an admiral. She was an architect. She designed the rules and created the tools that the entire digital world is built on. It's one thing to write the first chapter of a book, but she basically invented the alphabet. And she left us all with this final piece of advice. It's like a pirate's motto for every innovator out there. This really was the guiding principle of her entire life, and it's the perfect thought to end on. The most dangerous phrase in the language is, "We've always done it this way." Never, ever be afraid to challenge that.